Hey, it's Building Out Loud. It's another week with me, Randy Silver,
Faith Forster.
and we're here following Faith's journey as she builds Discovery from the ground up, and I'm along for the ride along with the rest of you. But Faith, we definitely have stuff to check in with how things are going on the startup, but you went out and into the real world this week. You met people in person and everything. How was it?
I went to ProductCon last week, the AI leadership conference. It was really useful research, actually. It was good to hear different stories on where people are at in their thinking. And actually, it picks up quite neatly from our last conversation in that one of the speakers was a COO from BT, which is obviously a regulated business. And they are very much thinking about this as an AI native transformation of their stack. So they are biting the bullet and going through and addressing some of their legacy products and looking at the infrastructure and the data they have sitting behind those and actually trying to transform them and bring them up to speed in an AI agentic world. So it's quite interesting to sort of understand better the spectrum of different tech businesses and where they are. But I also had some good conversations. One of those is with Saris, who is the founder of Jack and Jill. They're a AI native recruitment business that's raised 20 million. Interestingly, they have completely automated the customer feedback loop. So their main user interaction is with two agents. If you're a candidate, it's with Jack, and if you're a business trying to recruit, it's with Jill. And so the users tell Jack or Jill if something's broken or not working right. They get user feedback as part of that interaction. And they've actually built a completely automated loop. So that feedback goes to an agent that collates it and works out what's wrong, what happened. That then goes to a supervisor agent that then reviews and decides whether or not to go ahead and fix it. That then goes to another agent that then does the fix. That agent then tells Jack or Jill that the problem has now been fixed. And then Jack or Jill tells the user, which is really interesting. Complete game changer, I think.
It is interesting. It is also slightly terrifying. This use case may make sense because it's within a service already, and I don't know what is the nature of these fixes that it's building are. But I was talking to a former client last week, and they were telling me something very similar. They've built a feedback system so that it takes information back from their customers and prioritizes it and potentially builds a solution or prioritizes things for being automatically built. And the question is, are you a product company at that point? Are you able to maintain an ecosystem and a platform, or are you just building an infinite feature factory? And the reason for not doing a feature factory in the past was cost of maintaining that platform and trying to stay on target towards a strategy. Does being infinitely configurable for every user need, is that a good business model now? Is that something you can do? Is the math changed that much? I don't know. I'm terrified though. The difference between strategy and feature factory in a world where you can automate a build of every feature request.
In the case of Jack and Jill, at least, he differentiated responding to customer feedback, which I assume was very tactical. Things weren't quite working the way they should have with the agent. He differentiated between that and things that they wanted to build in terms of where they wanted to take the product. He saw those as two different things, and the latter obviously wouldn't be fully automated. It is interesting to see a business actually putting into practice now a highly automated environment where you would have to have some sort of review or observability, the ability to see what feedback those agents are getting and what they've done in response to that and be able to check that. But over time, you sort of build that trust in those agents. And so it just kind of showed the potential of where it could go in terms of automation. I think each business is going to have to make that choice, and probably multiple times. They'll be less comfortable with it. They'll try it, and then they'll increasingly look to do more of it until they find the right balance for them.
In the context of what Jack and Jill is trying to do versus the context of what BT or Discovery are doing, BT is a regulated company. For anyone who doesn't know BT, they are essentially the national telephony infrastructure of the UK and the broadband and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then what you're trying to do with Discovery, which is obviously not at that stage, but the companies, your potential clients here, are multinational, significant corporations that are using this as part of their decision stack, so it needs to be rock solid. Yeah, what's your instinct? What are you thinking of these conversations?
Targeting corporates anytime soon. I think that's a difficult path to tread as an early business, but it has made me stop and step back a little bit, because from all the talks I heard at ProductCon, plus all the feedback I've had from customers from Alpha, there's so many ideas of things that I could build in this product. And I did go a little bit crazy last week and I built quite a lot out. And for a product that was already overwhelming, it is now 10 times. And I had that suspicion anyway. I actually got to the point where I'm like, this is not right, this is too complicated, too specific in certain things as well, and it's just going to miss the mark with too many businesses. And then I spoke to a couple of people and they confirmed exactly what I had been thinking. I do need to simplify it, but it is like we've always had an iterative process with the product, right? But that's largely been forced by the cost to build. You have to descope, you have to build something small and then release it to customers and then get feedback and iterate from there. In a world where you can just build these things, it is interesting to see the boundaries of that you can get carried away, you can do too much. And actually, the fact that we had that constraint of not being able to build too much had benefits in terms of bringing customers and users along the journey with you. So you did actually, with each iteration and each time you release something extra, you were reshaping their expectations and their behavior and the way that they use your product. But it does kind of show the dangers of the ability to just build, right? And get a little bit too carried away. Like it's okay because the cost to build is small. So it's like, yeah, I built too much, fine. I've now got a better understanding of that. I can pare it back. I think one of the things that's become clear is I've lost the view of who the ICP is here and what I'm building for and what that core process is.
The cost to build is small, but the cost of time, the cost of speed and learning, it sounds almost like you've got a little bit of shiny object syndrome in that you've got all this excitement about all the other things you could do, but have you figured out what you wanted to learn from the initial phase, and have you actually proven or disproven that yet?
I got a lot of really valuable feedback on the features and the considerations for purchasing, the considerations to implement this, how it fits with other technologies. So there was a huge amount of learning there. I actually think where the challenge comes from is something quite different. Two things is one, I started speaking to investors. And there's always a challenge for founders at that early stage startup. We inherently know you should stay narrow and be really, really focused on an ICP. But then when you start talking to investors, they want a big market potential. As I started talking to different AI native businesses and understanding where they were heading, I'm like, oh, I could help with that too. Whereas my initial ICP had been sort of B2B SaaS and more traditional companies that are on the AI journey. That's always an ongoing tension of staying narrow and focused and doing something smaller really well versus having significant potential. The second thing is really understanding that spectrum of where businesses are on the journey of moving towards AI native and how do you meet people where they're at, but to help them go on that journey and be able to support that in a way that's kind of flexible, but not trying to be all things to all people is actually quite a difficult balance.
So the thing that I'm still a little bit confused about is which phase you're in. You said you have talked to lots of people. You've shown the product. Some people are playing around with it. Are you in a directed learning stage where you're trying to prove a specific hypothesis, or are you in an open learning and just getting lots of feedback and playing around and just seeing where it goes at this point?
Coming out of alpha, I had two hypotheses on what this problems the product could solve, and those were both validated. I think where I started moving into something that was more of a strategic advisor, that opened up a third hypothesis around supporting the actual product strategy, and that's where I started going off track a little bit, I think. And it got a bit too complicated. It was too much. With all this feedback and this feeling of like, knowing I've got off track, like I'm so glad I haven't raised money at the moment or committed myself to this, because I was like, well, is this right? Because I'm also starting to find other solutions that are doing parts of this. And so it did make me question, do I just say, actually, this was an interesting experiment and I've learned a lot and let's wrap it up here and move on. I have also had some CPO roles come up. There are other things I could be doing. On the other hand, I've also got beta customers chasing me. So there is some validation there that there is potential here. And I think if I let it go at this point, I feel like I could regret that. Interestingly, the voice I've had in my head has been yours, telling me just get it out there and get people using it. And so that's exactly where I came back to. I just need to get this thing simplified and out, and then I'll get people actually using it and giving me that feedback.
What I'm hearing from you at the beginning of this conversation is there's just infinite possibility, and that is a playground, and it's a huge amount of fun to play with. And it's great. The potential for this is incredible. What you've learned about how to build and where you can go. But it doesn't seem useful to just keep exploring if you don't have that base hypothesis sorted, if you don't have initial set of customers that you're growing alongside with, that you're learning from, and then continuing to iterate with them, then prioritizing whether it's adjacent markets or new segments or whatever it might be. I still feel like there's a lot of value in the traditional precepts of product strategy that you should be applying to this. But it's very easy for me to say that from this side of the window when I'm not responsible for any of it and I'm not sitting in any of those feedback sessions.
Like it's all on me, right? Like literally, I talk about what we are doing. enjoyed some drinks with some product leaders after ProductCon. I was chatting to some of them and they were aware of what I was doing because one or two of them had been part of my alpha group. And I kept saying, oh, what we have done is like, oh, the royal we, me and my agents. It's very interesting use of I, we, they pronouns. But it's an interesting view on product teams, right? Because the way we set up product teams is to have a product manager, a tech lead, and a designer who are all representing the different dimensions of the risks, desirability, feasibility, and viability. And there's natural tension between those. And there's value in having different people representing those and bringing that tension into the decision-making process. When it's just you, it's really easy to just have that recency bias and get caught up on something and off you go. And when the tools to build the stuff that helps you run off and just go are that easy. So that tension that I'm having is actually coming from people like you and other product leaders that I am friendly with and are speaking to on a regular basis, drawing me back and saying, no, you've missed the mark here. You need to rethink this.
I've been a consultant for like 7 years now, and I have exactly the same thing. I have a whole bunch of things that I've spun up during that time, small things, variations on my practice. And there are some parts of it that go very well by itself, but the parts that are the most successful and the most rewarding are the parts I do with partners. And that's because there is that natural tension and the accountability partner. And we were talking before we started recording today about one of the talks you heard at ProductCon about product leaders or product people in general should take some more responsibility for P&L and step more into the GM role, whether they're officially granted it or whether they're earning it and representing it. And yes, the product person, you can play the role of designer and developer and product all in one now. You may not have that tension, but the other side of that, the artificial barrier, we throw up a lot of the business versus product people, which is a terrible thing. I mean, we are all the business in any company. But I heard somebody say it just this morning and I threw up in my mouth a tiny little bit. But it's a real thing. It comes up, and the tension of having someone else to talk to and ground you. And I don't think agents are quite there yet to play that role.
You can get a lot of value out of feedback sessions and people giving input, but at the end of the day, they only know so much. It's quite limited. And so in terms of understanding that core thread and where you focus and how do you have that discipline, it is a challenge. So that's my commitment for this week, is to just get something that people can start using out the door.
I'm going to ask you a total non sequitur. Do you play poker at all?
No.
So one of the hardest things for people to learn when they first begin playing poker is people look at their cards and they see that they've got nothing and they fold. And one of the first things you're taught is never fold until somebody asks you for money, because it's all theoretical. Every time it comes around to you, unless someone has put a bet or a raise on the table, you get another free bite at the apple. You can get to see another card. You can get another round. So you don't fold until someone officially asks you for money and there's a commitment. But at the same time, you don't learn anything about other players unless you ask for money and see if they're willing to match you or not. And it's the same kind of thing with customers. With discovery, you can do all the discovery in the world and people will tell you lots of really useful information. But until you actually ask them how they are using it and ask them for money for it, you're never going to learn that much. The lessons are theoretical until you ask them for money. That's my wisdom of the week. So what is the plan for the week then?
I'm going to force myself to get a version out to the beta customers. They are waiting and they're asking for it. That's a good sign. I think I'm just going to use that as a forcing function and really simplify it and get something out there.
So the question for next week is, Faith, have you shipped it?
I'm kind of dreading that one already, but yes.
Or how close are you to shipping? That's also reasonable.
When I pushed this into production for alpha, it hadn't been in production before, and so there was a huge amount of testing I had to do to get it to the point where it could be used properly. This time it's already in production. There's still a lot I need to go through and tidy up. I also want to get a code review done before they start using properly, but I can share it and get feedback before I actually put them on the platform and start using it in anger. By the end of this week, I can definitely have a version where I'm sharing it. I'm getting the beta customers ready to use it, I think, and then I'll get the code review done in the background. But it's going to take discipline, that's for sure.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing where you get to over the week. You're going to ship it just to shut me up.